Over the weekend, I had a chance to go to my first book signing for 20 Essential Games to Study. And while I was there, well, not too many people showed up because, of course, it had rained that day. I had a chance to talk to a few people who weren't gamers or who knew gamers about what it means to be in the game industry. And as always, it's very illuminating to talk to people who aren't following this stuff, morning, noon, and night, as probably most of you watching this video are right now. And it raises again a very tough discussion about the difficulties of talking game design. Not game programming, not game art, but what it means to design a title. What's the difference between a good and a bad game? Everybody thinks about Call of Duty or Fortnite. One Muller, she was not too happy about how addicting Fortnite is these days. But the issue is that the topics that we talk about when it comes to game design here on the channel and on Game Wisdom, to me, this is second nature by now. It's as easy for me as breathing. But it still is considered like a magic or some lost art to the vast majority of people, especially for consumers who just look at video games or they just know about things, from like a second or third party. During my time there, I talked about, we got on the top of arcade games, so I brought up how they were designed around metrics-driven game design to get you to spend money. And the people there just looked at me going, that actually happened? And the thing is, this kind of stuff is easy. And I know a few of you right now are probably laughing yourself like they couldn't figure it out. But even most gamers don't understand the underlying concepts when it comes to game development. And it raises, I think, two big problems I want to talk about today. The first one is the low bar of when it comes to game design and game criticism. Fans know that I don't have much respect for most YouTubers, streamers, and quote-unquote game journalists when it comes to discussing game design industry topics. My respect for them is down there, not my floor, at least another 200 to 300 feet down. And the problem is that the discourse when it comes to game design is still very much elementary or kindergarten level. Again, you have on one hand people making videos about how game developers are deceiving people, that games are being murdered, and just a bunch of people ranting and raving about whatever's the popular topic. But then on the flip side, you have the people on the game journalist or quote-unquote game journalist side whose articles themselves don't really lend themselves to higher discourse when it comes to game design. Again, discussing how a game makes you personally feel doesn't exactly help raise a discourse when it comes to what it means to design a video game. And what's very disturbing about this is that, and I'm going to sound completely fool myself when I say this, but I kind of feel like I'm still 3 to 5 years ahead of everybody when it comes to discussing game design topics. And I know a few of you right now are going to get ready to leave some sly remarks down below, but I still think this way because I see on Twitter people talking about game design and trying to discuss various topics that I've already laid out foundations and had very long talks about here or on Game Wisdom. Like, to give you an example, a game journalist I follow was talking about the game Below. And they were saying, Below would be better if there was more replayability instead of using fixed environments. And I was just sitting there going, yes, that's a variance. It's something that I've said many times over about how to add replayability to roguelike or hardcore Souls-like kind of designs, about giving the player different ways of experiencing it. And if we start talking about that, this video will be probably an extra 30-40 minutes. Which for those of you watching, you probably don't have a problem with that, but my voice does have a time limit. And like I said, when it comes to talking about game design, this stuff is second nature for me. In fact, I can close my eyes right now and I can picture the trophy room achievement design of an action roguelike in my head, where players will use various items, and by placing them in a room or an environment, will then infer or affect the procedural generation going forward. And in fact, I lied about that. I don't need to close my eyes to see that. That's just how my brain is wired at this point. But, like I said, when it comes to most people talking about game design, it's either kept at the hyperbole level or at the personal level. And while those stories don't aren't bad entirely. It's the emotional side. It doesn't really raise the discourse when it comes to talking about game development. Somebody who's studying game design who wants to build a video game doesn't give a crap about why Gone Home is an emotional journey for you, or why What Remains of Edith Filch, something like that, was such a groundbreaking game or remind you of your childhood. And again, it's always that there's two sides when it comes to game journalism: the art side versus the mechanic or the science side. And again, most journalists talk about the art. But while I can sit here and talk about game design, the other problem when it comes to discussing this is at the high level, and that's where I'm at. So, before we get to some footage, here's a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters. And the game that I'm bringing up has nothing to do with the thumbnail for this piece, because I make you work for these design lessons. And that's actually part of the problem. And now a quick shout out to our supporters over on patreon.com/gwbicer. Alright, so what we have here is Asura. This is a game that if you're a fan of mine, you know that I'm a huge fan of for its different take on roguelike and action design. But it also represents a good example of the difficulty about talking about design at a high level. With this game, when you're watching footage of it, it looks like your box standard action game. But what makes this game work and so different is under the surface. From its roguelike design, the procedural skill trees, the reward systems, things like that. But the problem is, that kind of stuff you don't really see. You have to play the game, you have to get under the surface to figure it out. And this is one of the things that I was talking to the people at the book signing about, that what makes this work is that, or what makes game design work, is not something that you can just show footage of. We even had this discussion during, I believe, one of our live stream talks, that being able to play a game like Asura, or show footage of something like The Darkest Dungeon or Renowned Explorers, doesn't really explain how these games work. This is why when I play a game like Renowned Explorers or Darkest Dungeon, I'm always talking about what my thought process is. Because if you're watching footage of those games, or especially Cultist Simulator, and you don't know or you don't have any experience with them, you will have absolutely no idea how to play those games or what is even going on. And with this topic about discussing design, it becomes very hard, I feel, to put into words what makes things work while still making it appealing. Again, for people who want to already or who already have a passion about game design, the videos I put out on Game Wisdom here, the articles and so on, are a treasure trove of information. However, they're not really great if you don't already have that interest. They don't have that pop, I guess. And while this may seem joking, the fact that so many people watch, the TMZ style videos or the drama videos about the game industry, it does show off a big problem about discussing game design topics. That it's very hard to explain to people why this stuff matters. Why is platforming, like with my second book, a very complicated genre to design despite being over 30 years old? Why is a game like The Darkest Dungeon such a great form of design while still having some issues when it comes to grinding? Again, you can say very easily a game sucks or it's great, but explaining it at the deeper level, it takes knowledge and it takes understanding of design. And while that is certainly achievable, breaking that down to something that is digestible for a lot of people is its own unique challenge. The owner of the bookstore, while I was there, he showed me some of the other books they have on design aimed at kids. Like there was a Minecraft book, 101 games to play, things like that. And while the knowledge itself didn't really help me at all, the presentation was very well thought of and laid out for somebody. And that, I think, is where I certainly need to improve on, where I hope I've been improving on this past year. For those of you who've been following me here and on Game Wisdom, I hope you've noticed kind of a small bump in terms of the overall production quality. The thumbnails have gotten a lot more interesting. These videos are now broken up with more game footage. And again, it's not about changing the message. I'm not, dumbing down what I'm saying. I'm just trying to present in a more appealing package. And I think that is where things need to go. Because again, talking about game design with only game designers is certainly great. I love doing it. But it doesn't help raise the discourse or the signal to noise when it comes to design here and on the internet and everywhere else. Again, many people still find video games to be this little tiny thing aimed at kids that, anyone can make a game. But as we all know, it takes a lot more than that. And the only way things are going to improve is that we need to expand the knowledge of what it means to be a game designer. I like to think I'm doing that with my presentations and the stuff here, and I'm trying to find more ways to reach out to people, such as at schools and such. But to begin to wrap things up for today, the discussions about game design are kind of having trouble at the low level with so many people just making, again, these drama videos, but also at the high level when it comes to explaining the stuff and having it make sense to people who aren't already game developers. And there's no easy answer to this, because you can't just dumb things down, because then there's no value in it. But if it's too high up, without having kind of a foot in the door for new people, you're not going to grow that audience. Because again, showing footage of complicated video games, or even something like Asura here, doesn't explain why these games matter. It doesn't help to illustrate what makes the design work, or in some cases with certain titles, why it doesn't work. And there has to be an easier way to do this. So for people watching this right now, I guess I'm going to throw it over to you. What do you think would help to expand the discussion on game design? Let me know in the comments below, but otherwise, thanks for watching today's Industry Insight. Be sure to check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And if you'd like to get mentioned on our Patreon page, check out patreon.com/gwblazer. But until next time, have a good afternoon. If you're looking for another book about game design, be sure to check out my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, out now. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.